But where are you really from?
A podcast about the Asian American struggle.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to But Where Are You Really From?
Today we have a special guest, my old roommate and really close friend and doctor, Sandeepa. Hello.
Woo!
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'll introduce the topic and then I want to introduce you. The reason we have Sandeepa on today is the topic we want to cover is kind of East meets West in terms of medicine. And I felt like Sandeepa would be a perfect guest because she's a Western trained doctor, but is very spiritual. And we've had some spiritual journeys together that we'll probably get into. So anyways, I felt like you'd have a really balanced approach to this topic. So we wanted to have you on. But let's give our listeners a little intro. Introduce yourself however you'd like, and then when you feel comfortable, if you could throw in your answer for, but where are you really from?
My name's Sandeepa Mullady. Weird, now that I'm married, new last name. I am a neurologist by training, and I'm currently a memory and aging fellow, so I focus on dementia in particular. And I'm from San Francisco. That's my home base right now. In terms of where am I really from, the SAS answer is, oh, the South Bay. And they go, oh, South Bay of India? And I'm like, somewhere around there. But no, my parents grew up in Chennai, so I am actually technically from the South Bay in India as well.
Oh, you keep it vague, huh?
Exactly, so not lying either way. And now with this new last name, I've actually gotten emails being like, are you sure your last name is Mullady? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm positive.
Are you sure? Oh, and maybe you need to give your little disclaimer before we get
I definitely should. So all my opinions are my own. I'm going to de-affiliate them with my institution. I work at UCSF currently.
Well, we're very happy to have you on, so thank
Yay.
you for joining us. Okay, so I think we wanted to kick it off by kind of setting the stage of like the history behind the lesser known portion of this medical world for most people, which is probably the Eastern Eastern is also like a kind of loaded way of describing the more like non-traditional medicine as well, because I think most people when they hear Eastern medicine they think of Chinese medicine because it's the most like widely popularized probably, and I think a little bit more accepted by Western medicine as well. But East, depending on how you define that, there's also like South Asian very ancient medicine as well. So I think we can give a little bit of like history, but not too deep, and some kind of overview of the Chinese side of it. And then, not that you're an expert necessarily on South Asian medicine, but I think we'd be curious the way that like your family, has talked about it, or any experience that you've had with that growing up, if they integrate it into any sort of the way that they look at, medical practices and whatnot. So starting on the Chinese side. So I looked it up. Much like everything in Chinese history, it's been around forever. So the first recorded history of Chinese medicine was in the 3rd century BCE, so a gazillion years ago. And it's weird because I was trying to find like the origins, and the like recorded history is tied to this script that was attributed to someone named Huangdi in Chinese, but it's like yellow emperor, literally yellow emperor. It's confusing because there's another phrase that sounds exactly the same, Huangdi, which just means emperor, but this one specifically is like yellow emperor. So I don't know. But I think he was not maybe a real person, because from what I found, it was like he was revered as a deity. but he was also supposedly like one of the first emperors of China. Very confusing. But anyways, first Chinese medicine written down, was apparently dialogue between him and his physician. And a lot of those practices are kind of the foundational bases of current Chinese medicine. But I think skip past history, I think what's more interesting about Chinese medicine versus like Western medicine is the approach that they take for looking at treating patients, which is more preventative than like diagnostic, right? It's like they're not waiting for something to be broken to treat people. They're trying to just like maintain holistic health. So actually, it's interesting because Ramon recently had a medical situation and we were looking into how to help his situation more naturally. And I was asking my parents about like, well, is there any like Chinese herbal medicine or something he can take to help the pain or whatever? And they were like, honestly, you don't fix things with Chinese medicine. Like if something's already broke, like you gotta go fix it with, Western stuff. And then the Chinese stuff can like help strengthen it and like make your whole system stronger. So yeah, the idea around Chinese medicine is really like maintaining the balance between the, your qi or, your energy, your life breath throughout your body and like keeping shit balance so that if something's out of whack is when something will appear broken or like messed up, which you'll then have to address through other means. But I just thought that was interesting because it's more like, I think in the Western context, we always think of medicine as like last resort. It's like, okay, I don't think about needing medicine until something's wrong with me versus this is like a daily kind of thing to help maintain a well balanced, healthy life.
It's interesting. That's very similar to South Asian, I think, medicine as well. I mean, to give a little intro, I think Ayurveda, which is the big South Asian Eastern medicine practice, was founded maybe like 3rd century also BCE, even before then, but it's unclear because it's a lot of oral tradition as well. In the older Indian times, there was sort of this idea that people had to become specialists in something. So there was people who specialized as warriors, people who specialized in trade, and there were similarly people who specialized in medicine. And Ayurveda was that form of like sort of oral medicine that was brought to like the kingly traditions back in the day. I think the first written document might have been closer to 1st century BCE. Don't quote me on that. But that's sort of what I've read as well. Similar to Chinese medicine, it's all about balance and maintaining homeostasis. So Indians call it kapha, vata, and pitta. So basically, those 3 life forces are representative of like fire, air, and earth. And it's about maintaining a balance between that in your body. It's very fascinating because you actually see Ayurvedic doctors listen to your pulse and they believe they can feel the life force of each pulse and they can tell you which of your sort of energy forces are out of balance. And they say that is the one you need to work on as well. So it's all about preventative medicine as well. So it deals a lot with nutrition, exercise, mental health, and spirituality as well as a big part of Ayurvedic medicine is how do you heal the mind, the body, and the soul, because all of those are interlinked. And if 2 of those are broken, one of those is going to be broken as well. Similarly, once things are broke, there's nothing really to fix it. There's like herbs that they recommend as more of a preventative measure, and sometimes even like heavy metals, which is why it's gotten a bad rep in Western medicine, is because some of these heavy metals, when taken in high amounts, can be toxic. But what a lot of Ayurvedic doctors say is once there's an imbalance, you have to treat that with Western medicine and then slowly wean yourself off of that with Eastern medicine. So it's a very similar practice as well. But the idea is hopefully you're maintaining your body in such a fashion that you never need Western medicine.
Can you explain the heavy metals thing a little bit more? Because I read
Yeah.
that and I was very confused of like what that was supposed to be doing.
I think it's this whole idea like India is like loves pure metals, heavy metals. So like for instance, we cook a lot of our food in copper pots
Mm.
because like copper and these metals are supposed to bring the life force of the earth around them. And so
Mm.
some of these herbs are like cooked or mashed in some of these like gold pots or copper pots, which in high amounts for sure can be toxic, but in low amounts, we actually need copper and stuff daily to maintain like a good homeostasis and
Mm.
metabolism as well.
Do you love ramen, Jesse?
Oh my god, yes.
Don't you hate the shitty instant ramen we have here in the States, though?
Totally and completely.
What if I could tell you that you could get premium instant ramen direct from Japan delivered straight to your door?
Did you know that in Japan, instant ramen is actually legit? They put a lot of care into using high quality ingredients for the soup, the noodles, and the toppings.
But how do I get access to that when I live here?
Well, bitch, you're in luck. We've teamed up with 5am Ramen, a business based out of Tokyo that is obsessed with all things ramen. They are offering premium curated sets of the best instant ramen in Japan to consumers worldwide.
And with our special discount code, you'll get 5% off your order and free shipping worldwide. Just use really from 5 at checkout.
Head over to instantramen.jp now and use our promo code REALLYFROM5.
Oishi!
Okay, well, I love that there's so much similarity between them. And it sounds like Ayurvedic is even older than Chinese medicine. But the pulse thing is interesting because when I was looking up, like, how do Chinese medicine doctors, like, assess a patient, and pulse is one of the main ones as well. It's really, really kind of wild to me, the idea that you could get so much information just from someone's pulse versus like when you go to a Western doctor and they take your pulse, it's not like you're not expecting any like mind-blowing revelations from that. They're just like you're dead or you're alive or it's like so.
No, it's true. I think in Western medicine we have such high-end diagnostics, right? Like we have the EKG, we have the echocardiogram that, as a neurologist, for instance, I just look at the monitor to see that their heart is going. I don't sometimes necessarily even take the time to listen to their heart because for me, the neurologic exam is perhaps what's more important. But cardiologists swear, and this is where specialty by specialty differs, that you listen to the pulse, you can like hear the arrhythmia, you can hear the murmur, and based off of that, depending on where that murmur is, they say, oh, okay, you have a systolic murmur, perhaps part of your ventricle is hypertrophied or something like that. So there is that practice, but that practice I think has become less reliable or perhaps less taught in the setting of new diagnostics.
Interesting. And to your point about specialists, maybe our regular encounters with doctors usually are like a general practitioner, or like, the default doctor. So maybe they're not as trained in that kind of.
In that thing. Because like a general exam is so much different. Like a neurologic exam, and this is where my bias comes in. Like the reason why I like it is that you can see like a mild drift in the arm and you say, aha, that person has something called the pronator drift. That's an upper motor neuron sign. There's something probably wrong in like the spine or brain, most likely brain, and so you're able to sort of pinpoint a localization, and it's almost like the MRI, and then you decide, do I need an MRI? Do I need to look at the nerves? Do I need to look at the spine? You're able to pinpoint the localization of the problem, and from there you can get to etiology. So it's one of the, I think, last few specialties where the exam actually tells you what's going on, which is, I think, a dying practice in a lot of medicine.
It is really cool to see you or to hear about your way of diagnosing things, because it is not what I'm used to seeing when I go to like, urgent care or whatever, just like, I don't know, something's wrong with me, I'd figure it out. I feel like they just ask the same 20 questions and then at the end they're still like, I don't really know what it could be, like, just to be safe, let me prescribe you 3 different things and like we'll find out whatever it is. I'm like, oh, okay, that didn't seem very precise at all, but okay.
Yeah, I think if Western medicine were a Band-Aid, urgent care would be like the adhesive on that Band-Aid, It's like, it's basically being like, how can I patch things to the minimal degree before they see a specialist or a primary care doctor and get some of that workup going. And urgent care will never give you refills of medication because they don't know what they're treating necessarily. But it's when you go to the, primary care doctors, which are now, by the way, being labeled as preventative doctors as well. So it's coming back into practice, and specialists that you get, okay, what is the exam and what do these tests tell you about what this person has? But sometimes when we're healthy, we obviously, luckily, don't go through that entire process.
Yeah, Jesse, I don't know about you, but ever since moving away for college, like post-college, I haven't had a regular doctor.
Yeah, I generally see the same doctor, but you don't get a lot of time to talk with the doctor. Like, it's really brief, and I feel like maybe some of the reason why a lot of things are missed is because you don't build a rapport with the doctor. So then you like, some people may not be comfortable saying all the things that they want to say to like a complete stranger.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and it goes both ways as well, right? Because the doctor, if you're a primary care specialist, say in Kaiser, or when I was at the general doing general neurology care, I would have sometimes 10 patients in the span of 4 hours, So, and some of them are double booked, or sometimes I'd have 12 and I'm double booking people just because they're from low income communities and we're trying to get as much people in as possible. And that means less dedicated time. And so I feel less comfortable telling people what's going on. I end up seeing them more frequently because I'd rather give them more time more frequently than less time once in a while, but then there's certain questions as a physician that you need rapport to ask. For instance, stroke specialists, like similar to cardiologists, the thing that prevents stroke, right, is weight reduction, exercise, good eating habits. And those are things that in today's society have become very, very sensitive topics. It's very hard in the doctor's office to talk about weight, because we're in a society where, healthy at every size is a thing, which is fair. But sometimes, weight needs to be addressed to reduce your risk of certain things. And so it's about talking about that gently, but sort of the data shows the more you talk about it in the doctor's office, the more likely one message at some point is going to kick in, right? So it's sort of the antagonism of, oh God, I don't know this person well enough yet to like have these more difficult conversations, but you have to in order to make sort of maybe an iota of change in a future visit.
Wow. All right, let's transition maybe. So one thing we want to talk about, I think it's already pretty clear based on what we've already discussed, but the kind of like the intermingling of the two in terms of like, just because Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine exists and people practice it doesn't mean that they like negate science, right? They're like definitely like, I still got to see my like regular doctor, and to what we were all saying, if something's broke, I'm going to go to that doctor, and then I'll maintain with, the more holistic stuff. I think maybe I'm just painting like a fake picture or fake narrative here, but I feel like people that aren't as familiar with Eastern medicine maybe don't understand that, where they feel like it's kind of like shamanic or like, witch doctor-y type stuff, and there's like a segregation between the two. I don't know if you guys have that feeling too, because for me, it feels like if I'm talking especially to like a non-Asian person that's not as like SF hippie, you know what I mean? Like, I can see them kind of being like, oh, what? Like acupuncture, or like, what are you drinking? What's that soup? Like as if we don't believe in normal medicine just because we also have those things. I don't know if you've had those experiences.
I think it's actually becoming more integrated into Western practice in a
Mm.
weird way. When I first started back, I want to say in college, in the pre-med path, there was almost this antagonism when they're like, oh, there's the allopathic way, then there's the non-allopathic way, and there was almost a split. And as I'm going deeper and deeper to medicine, I actually see that some of these principles are coming back and they're saying, oh, there's like a way of doing both. You don't do one, which is fair, you do both. So, like for people with migraines or chronic pain, for example, acupuncture is a treatment that we can offer. And we say, hey, some people respond really well to this. We don't know why, but it works for certain people, you know?
Yeah.
And that's it. And they go for it. And some people only need that Eastern medical medicine practice and they're able to wean off their opiates. Good
Mm.
on them. I don't think that's anything bad. So I think the practice is coming around. I know in San Francisco, we have like an Osher Medical Center, which is like an integrative medical center, and it introduces things like meditation, mindfulness, which is, I think, the more Western way of saying spiritualism, because that's an
Hmm.
easier conceptualization of it, into practices like pain and into childhood diseases where kids are dealing with death face on.
Mm.
That's something that has been integrated quite nicely, I think.
The mindset part I feel like is so underrated for how much your brain can control like how you feel and how you perceive pain or health or happiness. So I'm really happy that, like you said, the like meditation is like the easiest way in, I guess, for people that aren't super connected to spirituality. But I am happy that there's some type of like integration that people are trying to make now. I still think it's going to be like hard for majority of people. Like I think we're coastal people, right? Like California, New York is like a different breed of people than the rest of the nation. But hopefully this is something that we can start integrating more, just because the mental health of it all is like one of the worst things happening in the country right now that we're not like grasping very well.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. We have, I think, a mental health pandemic and epidemic, and that has been going on for decades. And what's interesting is as society becomes quote unquote more evolved, that's when more mental health problems are happening. I was recently listening to a podcast where 1 in 4 kids are contemplating suicide. That's insane to me.
Wow.
That's like 25% of children. So just like we have this model of like you have to exercise your body every day to maintain your body, we need to have a similar thing where like, hey, your mind needs exercise too. And I think to broaden it, it doesn't just have to be meditation, right? It's about how do we live every day in the in between of happiness and sadness, where big happy things don't get to us. We feel them, but we say, we can let it go and go back to this equilibrium. And sad things don't get to us in the sense that we feel them, but we go back to this equilibrium. So even if you approach an everyday situation, and I think, and retrain your brain how to respond to said situation, almost like exposure therapy, if we can even call it that, you're in a way training your mind. So I think that is a way that Western medicine can integrate that spiritualism without calling it spiritualism, you know?
Mm.
It's about tricking people into spirituality. And what is spirituality? It's just living life in the median, in the equilibrium.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that because not recently, maybe a few months ago, had a conversation with my coworker, and I told him that I was taking up doing like meditation using this app called Calm because things have been really crazy, and I just needed like some time to really just clear my brain. And he was just like, I'm so busy all the time. I don't have time to do like nothing. He's like, how do you do it? And I'm like, that's kind of the point. Like the point is like you set boundaries so that you can have the time for yourself to do nothing so that your brain can be clear. And yeah, it was just like very different from what you were saying in terms of equilibrium. Like I feel like a lot of people are really far away from that and really don't realize that they are.
Yeah, I think there's a standard in Western society that everything needs to be happy. where everything needs to be perfect, right? And the sad truth about life is not always happy. Life is not always perfect. And if you have that expectation, you're never going to be happy, right? I've always said if your goal is happiness, that happiness will never come. But if your goal is to live life where, hey, nothing is going to affect me no matter what it is, you're going to actually be happy in a really weird frame of mind. Um, so yeah, it's all about that mental game and that mental training at the end of the day.
Well, since your specialty is neurology and you are arguably probably one of the most spiritual people that I know, personally, I'm curious how you combine those two worlds in your kind of day to day. And I mean, I guess from two facets. One is how you approach patients, and the other is more just like how you find that balance for yourself between being trained in this like very Western clinical setting and then melding that with your very spiritual, just like personal side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because neurology, in my mind, is all about the hardware, if that makes sense. Like we learn about the brain, the structure, the networks. The software is not really focused on, or there's an artificial division between neurology and psychiatry where the neurologists focus on the structure, the hardware, and the psychiatrists they'll focus on the software, the things that we can't see. But that's very artificial because what affects the structure affects things internally that we're not quite able to comprehend, right? So if you talk to many neurologists, some will say, I just like the fact it's so clean. There's something wrong in the structure, and boom, you get something wrong in the body. But in my mind, neurology is where I'm reminded of spiritualism and like how complex the mind is, because you get, say, a structural lesion or say a cut in the brain, and something happens physically, but the person's personality and the way they perceive the world changes as well. So it sort of reminds you that the mind is a complex network where not just emotions live, but sort of a higher plane of existence can live, right? Why I find dementia so interesting is sometimes those people they're losing their memory, they're losing their minds. Where is the higher plane of existence in those individuals? That question has is always fascinated me. I think it's there because there's a higher plane in everybody, but that lower plane of physical existence is no longer able to connect with that plane. And I think that's what neurology is about, is seeing the differences in those planes of existence. Um, so in terms of how I approach my patients, I've seen people with what we call non-epileptic seizures, which are convulsions that happen in the body not because of a structural problem, but because the software has run amok and it presents as something that looks like an actual epileptic spell, but it's not, right? So I've had to tell people, hey, one, what you're experiencing is completely real because it's happening to you. But two, we don't have the tools to detect what's going on in the software of your ecosystem. And the way to train that is by focusing on techniques that deal with the mind, including cognitive behavioral therapy, and making sure we deal with ways to, explore your traumas and anxiety. So that's where I'm able to bring that sort of into Western practice. And I think for me personally, Indian tradition or spiritualism in general has different ways that one attains that equilibrium. One of those ways is called karma yoga, which is the ability to have that sort of equilibrium in your work. And I think for me, being in medicine is like doing God's work in a way where I'm able to see myself in every patient, or at least I try to. And I say, oh my God, that person could be me. That person is me. That person is me. And that unity and that human experience humbles you in the sense that none of your problems seem so bad when they happen, and all of your successes also seem great, but not like the most impressive thing in the world. So it reminds me to maintain that equilibrium state. And it also brings me to a place of love and compassion, which I think is necessary to understand that unity between human existence.
Hey everyone, we love doing this podcast, and if you enjoy our episodes, we would really appreciate if you could support us in any number of ways. First is by subscribing to us, rating us, and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Second is by telling a friend. Third is following us on Instagram at whereareyoufrompod. Fourth is supporting us on Buy Me a Coffee. You can find out more about all of these by visiting our Instagram's link in bio. And again, our handle is at whereareyoufrompod. Thank you.
So going into our fortune cookie closing section is what we call our closing, because we like to end on a sweet treat. So we wanted to close things off with the most, and this adjective I'm going to use is probably from the Western lens because we grew up here, but the most like insane or out there Eastern medicine thing that we have respectively tried. I can offer my own to kick things off. So I honestly, my parents kind of had me do everything in Chinese medicine when I was younger, like in high school. But the thing that I was like, this is killing me, is they took me to an acupuncturist every week to fix many things, supposedly. I think the main reason was to help with my running injuries and my trying to get my hormones more like balanced. But then they were also like, oh, you're also short. We can probably make you taller too. I'm like, that seems not real to me, but okay. But I went like every week, and what people don't talk about, because Jesse, you were talking about like acupuncture is like very popular now, like a lot of non-Asian people do it, but I don't know how many non-Asian people do this type of acupuncture where I was like, I hate this. Is he would hook me up, he would put the needles in me, but then hook them up to an electromagnetic thing that would like pulse for an hour. And it felt really weird. And he was like, oh, it's not pain, it's just a different feeling. I'm like, don't try to tell me what I think is painful. Like, it was just really bizarre. But I think it was because, I mean, in doing research for this episode, it's like it was the meridians, right? Like certain points in my body where the chi is supposed to be residing. Yeah, so it was, reflecting back, I guess you wouldn't call it pain, but it wasn't a pleasant feeling. And it would be like pulsing every other second for a full hour. And I was doing that for weeks on end. And I was I hate this. It was like my least favorite
Did it work?
day of the week. No, it didn't work either.
What was it supposed to do again?
Well, he was trying to fix many things. I think that was the problem. He was trying to do too many things. Like, maybe if he was just focusing on, like, I was getting frequent shin splints from running cross country and track. So maybe if he just focused on, like, the muscle part of it, that probably would have worked. But he was also trying to fix my hormones. That didn't do anything. Because,
your height?
That's... Height did shit because I haven't grown since 6th grade. Let's be real. So yeah. So anyways, I think I'm open to trying acupuncture again now because it's been like 20 years or whatever, but I was not a fan of that. At least like that method and the like supposed, he was promising too much. Like it was not realistic what he was going to achieve.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that they did the stim thing, because in physical therapy, they do that, not with needles, but they put like patches on you and they do electrostim. So I guess there is some usefulness to that, but the needles were probably a little bit overkill.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. Honestly, I think my parents are probably same thing. They fed me like a bunch of weird stuff, so I can't even tell you like what's the weirdest thing that they fed me. But I want to say like the oddest thing that I've personally tried is getting a chiropractor. And I know it's like not that weird. It's like very popular now and like most insurances cover it. But I was like really skeptical for a long time because it's like, it looks like that person could literally like snap my neck accidentally. Because it's like the YouTube videos are just like, and so like I did it for a while and it was like fine. But it was the same thing with acupuncture. Like it didn't really help at all. It was just like, oh, that feels nice. But then it was like in terms of the actual issue that I came to address at PT, like it didn't really help it all that much.
Can I just say chiropractors scare me? Like the whole neck thing scares me
Yeah.
because we have like these like really important vessels that go to the brain right near the neck. And I've seen strokes from really bad chiropractic
Oh my God.
manipulations of your neck. This is where my like the Western part of me is like, I don't know about
Jesse,
chiropractors.
don't go anymore. Stop
Or
going
don't
to
do
the
it on your
chiropractor.
neck.
I haven't. I go to like a very like a legit physical therapy office now.
Oh
Okay,
my
Yeah.
good. Yeah, not
God.
on your neck. Neck is like a bad place to get any sort of manipulation done.
Jesus.
Yeah. Let's see. Crazy things I've done. Well, I think so. We've gone to a lot of Ayurvedic like specialists over time. And one of the issues growing up is like my parents thought I had a very poor metabolism, aka I was a fat child. So, so they're like, we must take her to the doctor to figure out
Uh,
what's going on, the Ayurvedic doctor. And he listened to my pulse, did all sorts of things, and was like, she has thyroid issues. And she needs to take a herb and it'll kick in years later. Took said herb. Anyway, years down the line in medical school, I got my thyroid levels measured. I do have autoimmune thyroid issues. I had like Hashimoto's
Whoa.
thyroid, yeah, basically like an autoimmune disease where I have hypothyroidism, which I'm now on like daily repletion for, basically, of my thyroid hormones. I tried that herb. It probably didn't work, but it was my family was like, "Yeah, we believe this guy. It seems like you have thyroid issues." And I was like, "There's no way." And we went to a Western pediatrician and he was like, Psh, "No,
Oh,
you can't
wow.
diagnose thyroid issues." And then, you know, years later, I did.
Whoa. So the cure
Wow.
wasn't maybe the cure, but the diagnosis was
This was real.
correct.
Yeah, in a very weird way. It goes to show you can't fix what's broke, perhaps already, or it wasn't apparent at that time because I leveled out and I became like a normal looking kid. So they were like, maybe this doctor was wrong.
Mm.
Interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Sandeepa.
Yeah.
Do you have any projects or anything you want to plug for our listeners?
No, I have zero projects at all. But I'm open to come and chat with me in San Francisco. A lot of my work is in homeless populations and in underserved populations and figuring out how to get them good care. So come chat. I'm open to chat with you guys about spirituality, homelessness, social justice issues, medicine, or just take you out to my favorite San Francisco coffee. No projects though.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandeepa. And listeners, if you have any questions for her, email us at telluswhereyou'refrom@gmail.com. The your is YOURE. Or if you have a story of your own about Eastern versus Western medicine, definitely write us in as well. And we will have a fresh new episode for you next week. So come back then. And until then,
再见, bitches.